Great. So welcome everyone. Really pleased to have you with us as we jump into our monthly meeting today. Let's just talk about what we're going to be reviewing together. And like I said before, I'm going to stay out of presentation mode just because I'm going to be toggling back and forth between a couple of different tabs up here at the top of my screen. But really what we want to look at are just a few updates, really trying to minimize them for these meetings because we just know how busy you are. Keep these meetings as focused as possible. So I think I just have two updates for you today. Then really going into our new e-learning tool on promoting student engagement, participation, safety, and well-being. Just want to show that to you, make sure you have the link and know how to access it. And then two very specific special education updates for you. One is the updated FAQ that we're releasing today, as well as a discussion about our special ed determinations. So a lot to do in an hour together, but we hope that you find it useful and productive for the work that you do and that we are so appreciative of. So let's just start with those updates. Let's take a look at what we have queued up here. Really, the first thing is just our special ed update newsletter that we send out on a regular basis. And so in the PowerPoint, and really appreciate Amy Paulin pitch hitting for us today and stepping up to help us on the tech side of today's presentation. Just being able to put the link into the chat for the special ed updates. But like I did the last time, just because I know you're busy, I just want to just quickly review with you what we put into this February edition of our updates, just so that you're all aware. Just always that reminder that this is where we put the information about our special ed leaders meetings. And if you happen to not receive a link, always please reach out ahead of time. We want to make sure that we are getting you what you need in a timely way. From our last meeting, right, the last time that we were together in January, we released the final section of our REE guidance, our Referral, Evaluation, and Eligibility Determination guidance. So we released the eligibility section. We went over that together in our last meeting. Just remember that here's the link. The interactive guide is here as what we call a reusable learning object. And so just being able to click on the link from here will get you right to it. And then also really remember that because of what we wrote in this guidance, it changes not substantively, but there are some changes to the ED1 form, the evaluation flowchart. And so I hope you find it helpful to see this side-by-side comparison of what was in the old version of the eligibility flowchart, particularly the questions, right? Because these questions matter. They really help us with that determination decision, really help teams with that discussion. And so we want to be really clear about what was in the old version and what's in the new version. And again, you may have had any questions since the last time we were together about this. Don't hesitate to put them into the Q&A section of our Zoom link here, our Zoom meeting here, so that we can put them together and be able to answer at the end of today's discussion. But again, just really want to highlight, I think this could be useful to you, useful for your teams to make sure that they're really clear about what the changes are between the old version and the new version. And of course, just updating your forms wherever you are using them, knowing that we've updated them on our website as well. So when you go to our website, you're going to see the new ED1 form. And so again, pleased to answer any questions you might have that as we go along today. And then also, we're going to talk about determinations more in today's meeting, so I'm not going to go into this further. And then just a reminder about reporting physical restraints, that they need to be reported quickly to us, no later than 3 school working days after the administration of the restraint is really the big takeaway here, along with the link of where you do so. But you're used to this. You've been submitting your data to us, so please just keep it going. And then finally, just a reminder about the temporary waiver for pre-K are no longer being issued. And then finally, a reminder about the 2022-2023 Teacher of the Year nominations, and we hope that you will consider thinking about nominating or applying. So those are the quick updates on what is in our special education updates. And the link that we have here, if you click on this link, It's where you can also sign up for the newsletters. It will take you to kind of a homepage before going directly to the version of the, the edition of the document that I just showed you. And so if you're not getting these updates, please consider signing up for them. The last kind of, just quick business item that I have for you today is we're really excited to get your feedback on the tiered focused monitoring process, and particularly the work that we've done with you this year. We are soliciting your feedback. We're seeking your feedback on the review process, including the training aspect of it and the support that you received all throughout the process. So we hope that you will provide us with that feedback. You will be getting the survey, as we note here, during the week of February 14th. If you were part of a review through January, and then in June, if your review happened between February and June. And again, I just want to underscore, your feedback matters a lot to us as in our work in building racial equity and looking at, how that intersection of civil rights and special education come together, particularly for children of color, and particularly towards developing greater racial equity across all of our schools in the state. And then, how does the TFM process also help to build and improve the systems, right? So that improvement becomes institutionalized, that it's something that the improvements that you make on your own, preferably, particularly through the self-assessment process, and then the improvements that, perhaps come through the review on the on-site as well. We want to know the extent to which they're helping to kind of build and improve systems that really impact student outcomes. So just, the survey is pretty quick, but our team really takes it seriously. And so please take some time to let us know. And just a reminder again, one more time, that the week of February 14th, we'll be sending out the survey if you had a monitoring visit through January, and then again in June if your monitoring occurred between February and June. So I hope you'll find that useful as kind of a heads up of what's coming, and we look forward to getting your feedback. So the next topic that I wanted to raise with you, that we've talked about this before, but we just have it in a new format. So the promoting student engagement, participation, safety, and well-being e-learning tool is something that we released last winter and updated this summer. And now, actually as of this week, we now have for you our e-learning tool, which can be found on the COVID-19 mental health and behavioral health webpage. And I think it's really timely, actually, to re-release this in this format, particularly because, COVID and particularly Omicron really impacted things like attendance and participation. And so maybe a good time to step back and relook at some of the issues that are covered in this guidance document. And again, I would encourage you to share this with your teams, keeping in mind that it's, just want to give you that quick overview of what's in it, just as a reminder that we've got, first the connection about, engaging and connecting with students and families, supporting students' more intensive needs, attendance as a tool for engagement and safety, recognizing abuse and or neglect and fulfilling the mandated reporter responsibilities, and a few appendices and resources, or one appendix in particular, about supporting students who are learning remotely. So particularly in the case of special education, if you have a student who's immunocompromised and is learning remotely, just want to remind you that this resource exists about some of the considerations about those remote learning services that you might be providing in some, very specific instances. And then, a lot of resources that actually are embedded in the tool itself and are very necessary for supporting our families. And I know that, one of the things that I just wanted to point out really quickly, I'm going to go to this section on engaging families as partners, is just to take a look at, some of the subheadings that we have here. And really this one about connecting families to resources is one that I think just really stands out to me. It's short, right? This isn't neuroscience, right? We can all grab this and absorb it quickly. But I know that, when we think about a lot of the struggle that families are experiencing right now, how do we connect them to resources, and what can the school's role be in helping families address some of their needs at home? And, sometimes, it has happened in the past that sometimes a 51A is filed because there are concerns about what's happening in the home that really might not be about abuse and neglect. I think some of the intention might be based on just seeing a family in a lot of need, and need can look pretty devastating to a child. And we understand that. We know that seeing the need is real. It's how can we support the needs of our families? And there are 4 here that I just want to point out in hyperlink that maybe of some of them, but if you're not aware of all of them, and it's only 4, might not be a bad idea just to come back and take a look at and think about, are there ways that you can connect some of your families to these resources, the family resource centers, Mass 211, handholdmass.org, and mass support as being 4. And so, maybe you and your teams just taking a look at this, thinking about some of the folks on your teams who are doing work with families right now, social workers, attendance supervisors, are they aware of all of these resources and connecting families to them? And, thinking about, again, just, how can we connect what we're hearing and seeing with what families might truly need? And so something to consider as well as a key resource. I also want to take a look at the attendance piece here, because I'm a little concerned about the impact that Omicron has had on attendance, and kind of how we're responding now, hopefully coming out of Omicron. How can we be thinking about just improving attendance? And one of my favorite resources in this section, just quickly to point out, is in this section about resources, the pathways to engagement, this toolkit for COVID-19 recovery through attendance is a webpage from Attendance Works, and really worth checking out. So, I know that, attendance is a lot about habits in a lot of cases for students and families, even for my own son. And so, how are we just reinstalling that kind of habit of coming to school regularly? How do we overcome some of the barriers that are impeding that habit of coming to school regularly? And so I hope that you'll take a look at this particular resource and really think about, who needs to be thinking about it on your teams, and how do we maybe bridge together the understanding of key ways of improving attendance, both from your attendance supervisor and your special education teams. Maybe getting them to talk to each other more around this toolkit could be of use to them, because we know that, again, there's a concern about attendance. And so what do we do with it? How do we work together as a team to overcome it? And again, think about then what are those situations where we need to file, and are there around attendance, and then, but really trying to avoid them when, they're particularly COVID related. If a student has had COVID, if a family member has had COVID, how can we think about the supports that we might need to provide jointly? And, always filing where necessary. If there is abuse and neglect, don't get me wrong, I would never dissuade you from filing. But what are some alternatives when the issue is, again, really not abuse or neglect, and just a concern about, the impact of a student or family member having COVID on coming to school? And then, I think there are some really good tips in here about filing where necessary, being a mandated reporter, and some good questions to be asking about, what do you know from the data about the frequency with which you are reporting, and what you can glean from the reports that you've made. So I won't go on and on about this, but I do hope it's a useful resource for you as you take a look at the supports that we're trying to provide families, particularly for the remainder of this school year. This year has been a real challenge on so many levels, and we've sort of gotten through a lot of them, but we know the types of issues that present themselves just before vacations, right? So what next week is going to look like, the run up to the April vacation, the run up to the end of the school year. These are anxious times. And so we hope that maybe, but just by taking a look at these resources, again, can just help the work that you're doing. And we appreciate, you're just sharing this link where necessary with members of your team. So just going back to our presentation real quick, let's move into 2 other very uniquely special education topics. The first being our updated FAQ. And I've got it right here for you. Oh no, I don't, right here for you. And Amy is putting it into the chat as an attachment. But let's talk about the why. Why are we doing this? What is DESE doing releasing an FAQ right now here on February 11th? Well, we get a lot of questions from you, right? And we appreciate you. We want you to ask these questions of us. And we hope that we can, instead of answering one by each, that in some ways by sharing with you the types of information that we're getting and what we're learning from you through these questions, through these interactions we have with you, if we put them in writing here, maybe, it's just helpful for everyone. It's helpful for everyone to know the types of answers DESE is providing. In addition to that, there was information that was released by OSEP just this past, at the beginning of this school year, or earlier this school year. And we wanted to make sure that we're linking our resources to theirs, that we're clear about the connection between federal responses to these questions and state responses to these questions. Again, just so there's no daylight between us, and that, you're able to, use this resource and not have, know where there's cross-referencing and know where we are uniquely answering some questions on our own. So let's take a look here together. I've highlighted some of the key things to be thinking about that I just want to point out for you today. And the first one relates to just child find. Just know that in this section on child find, we really referenced what OSEP already put out instead of uniquely trying to break new ground or explain things further. So just note when you come to this section on child find, we're really referring you to the OSER's return to school roadmap and all of the questions they answered about child find. And one of the things, again, that I really like about what OSER's did with that document is to think about the creative ways that you can go about doing child find, the ways in which you can use social media or just other outreach campaigns, kind of going beyond the standard letter to, reach out to families and through community service organizations and physicians' offices to really alert families to this idea that if they are concerned about the development of their child, that we are here to provide screening. We are here to provide evaluations as necessary. Let's go on to the next section, which is part B about referral and evaluation. Here's the good news. We only go up to the letter F, I do believe. So we're already on B. And so we're not going to overwhelm you with too much information here. But it is comprehensive, and it is maybe something, again, that's worth sharing with members of your team. And I think the important thing about referral and evaluation is this first question about long COVID and the impact of COVID symptoms that could be adversely impacting a student's ability to participate and learn. And does this require referral for special education? And we just want to be really clear here. The answer is yes. And this yes comes from, again, the OSER's return to school roadmap. So particularly when you're thinking about students who have COVID-related, ongoing COVID-related issues, long-term COVID-related issues. This is new for us in special education. It's been 2 years, so it's not brand new, but these issues are going to be with us for a little while. And so we just want to be clear about where we stand and where OSER stands on this issue related to the long-term impact of COVID on student development. I know we had some questions down here in part C about virtual meetings or telephonic IEP meetings. So just want to be really, really clear, and hopefully having this in writing will be useful to you and your teams. It is something we put in writing before, but we just want to make sure we always keep this front and center for you, that IEP meetings can indeed be held by telephone or video conference. But we want to make sure that the parent agrees to participate in this way. So there's more information down here about that, and particularly making sure that interpreters are available for any family member who might need that. But just want to be really clear that meetings can be held by telephone and by video conference. That was true before COVID. It's true going forward after COVID. In this moment, as you're looking at a lot of team meetings that need to happen this spring, just continue on. And I know we got this question in our last meeting, and so we just felt like we wanted to just hit this head on it and make sure you're really clear about that. I also think an important update is about digital or electronic signatures. Can they be used to indicate parent consent? And just note that we say yes, that they can be, but let's make sure that we're really paying attention to what comes along with this yes in terms of the responsibilities. They can be accepted as long as there are appropriate safeguards to protect the integrity of the process, and making sure that what you are providing in written notice to families about this is in the parent's primary language, and really making sure that it's understandable to the general public. I know this is something that we work on here at DESE as well. Sometimes we can get into us, and I've been a superintendent, I've been a special ed director, I've been a teacher. We can sometimes get into our lingo, right? That is not as easily understandable to our parents. And so just making sure that whatever language we're choosing is really accessible, and kind of running it through that accessibility check for ourselves to make sure that our parents will understand what we're saying about how we're asking for an electronic or digital signature. Part D, about the considerations for assistive technology and special factors and assistive technology. Important here about special factors IEP teams should consider when reviewing or revising or developing a child's IEP. I'm not going to go through all of these. I think what I just want to point out is that, when you have, for example, the communication needs of a child, let's look at 4 down here, considering the communication needs of a child. And if the child is deaf or hard of hearing, consider the child's language and communication needs, opportunities for direct communications with peers and professional personnel. So, I won't read the whole thing to you, but we know that this comes up on Plep B in particular. Really, these things, they're pretty familiar to us because they show up on Plep B. And really, what we want to make sure happens is that something like a communication need is considered all throughout the IEP. That we don't just, we certainly check it and address it on Plep B, but then thinking about how does it show up in the goals, how does it show up in the services, and having that through line through the whole IEP about some of these special factors that we, by law are required to consider, and just making sure that they stay kind of front and center throughout the whole IEP process. All of these questions are important. I certainly could have highlighted all of them. And particularly, one of my true loves about AT, that and how it relates to aided and augmentative communication. But there wasn't a change here, but still important to remember and to review about AAC. I think this, a question though about students having emotional impairments, just thinking about the ways in which the COVID pandemic may have negatively affected mental health needs. And so, again, we kind of refer you back to the guidance document that we just looked at. So all the more reason to keep that promoting student engagement, learning, well-being, and safety front and center. And then, at the same time, the ways in which we think about an emotional disability have not changed. How we qualify a student as having an emotional impairment, just having the language here, I think is hopefully helpful to you and helpful to your teams. I always appreciated that this one is pretty clear, like, a student has to meet one of these characteristics, and the characteristic has to have been present over a long period of time. I always felt like this was one of the disability categories that was in some ways clearest about how to identify whether or not the student can be determined as having this disability because of the way in which the regulations kind of spell it out in such, I feel like, pretty clear terms. Then finally, as we look down, there are more questions in here again that I hope you'll take a look at and take a look at with your teams. But I did want to point out that we do come back to the issue of compensatory services because we get a lot of questions about this. To this day, we get a lot of questions. And so let's just divide out what we have in E1, which is in general, how do we think about compensatory services? And then E2 is what if there weren't compensatory services meetings held for last year, or even, I hope not, but going back to the spring of 2020. And so let's just start up here. We've got information for you, again, hopefully in kind of pretty clear, simple terms about how to think about compensatory in general and how to approach it. And then just a reminder that if you, in the event that you haven't, for some reason, addressed compensatory education from last year, that we still encourage you to do, it's very important, you need to go back and convene the team and have those discussions as soon as possible. And then finally, when we get down to section F, and like I said, we only went up to F in this FAQ. The last section here that I just want to point out about ESY and thinking about the need for ESY. What are the factors teams should consider when determining if a student should receive ESY. We just thought it'd be helpful to just go back over that's an important thing to be thinking about, particularly, for the rest of this school year. So a lot of these decisions will be made between now and the end of the school year. And a lot of the planning for ESY, we know, is underway at this time. We're hearing from a lot of you that there are plans for, again, another kind of heavy dose of summer acceleration from the, through general education in your districts, that there'll be, summer enrichment academies or summer learning opportunities. And a lot of you are planning for ESY. So we just want to encourage you again to think about the opportunities that more summer learning presents for ESY. Are there more opportunities, for example, for inclusion during the summer? So just now, as you are, as we're heading into February break, we know that so much of the planning for summer is already beginning to happen, but really picks up after February break. And so encouraging you to work with, others planning summer services to see how they can be complementary to each other. And last summer, we had some lessons learned about, where ESY was offered for, let's just say, 4 weeks, and then there were kind of 2-week sessions of enrichment during the summer. We appreciated that what a lot of you did is you worked out so that there was some overlap, so that a student could do maybe 4 weeks of ESY through special education, and then maybe a 2-week summer enrichment program as well, and really have access to both. And we did have some parents who reached out to us when that wasn't possible, and feeling kind of upset about my child is being kind of excluded from being able to take advantage of this enrichment. And so again, just while you have time to look at schedules and do this planning, encouraging you to take a look at how you can make those complementary to each other and not in competition with one another. And we look forward to hearing your good ideas about how to make that happen and some of the exciting things that you might be able to do for students this summer. So keep us posted. We really want to learn with and along and with you. So that was a quick update on our FAQ. It will be posted soon, but in the meantime, Amy is putting it into the Q&A for you to be, into the chat actually, for you to be able to look at. Let's move now. Our last section for today is about the determinations that just came out this past week. And when I think about the determinations, I think about how I used to receive these letters. They've come out every year since I don't know when, but back when I was a special education director, which was a while ago now, I used to get those letters. And when I got them, they were the determination was directly tied to the accountability system. So whatever my district's accountability rating was the determination that I got. So at the time, my district was a level 3 district. That meant that I was automatically, I'll show you on the next slide, I believe we were automatically needs assistance. And when I got the letter, I remember thinking, this doesn't really tell me a lot about special education. This just reminds me that if you're level 3, you are automatically needs assistance. And that's it. There's not a lot of information here. It's not really kind of sparking a dialogue unique to special education, and yet it's meant to be a special education determination. And so our team here at DESE over the past few years, we've been really working to change that so that the determinations really do tell us something about the experience of students with disabilities in each of our districts, and really, help to, we hope, kind of, spark further internal dialogue about supporting our students with disabilities even further. And it's really meant to be the beginning of a conversation, not the end, right? And so hopefully these determinations, as you're receiving them, both what you'll be doing internally and the work that you will be doing with us, particularly if you're identified as needs assistance or needs intervention, is sort of a continuation of a conversation. This letter is not the end of the conversation whatsoever. And just so you all know, the only 3 categories that districts were identified for this year were meets requirements, needs assistance, and needs intervention. So it's just so I won't talk about what happens with NSI because there were no NSI districts this year. So again, I've talked a little bit about why we've done this, but let's go back over it in a little more detail. We want to have a what we've used and we've shared with you, and I'll talk a little bit more about right now, is a transparent process that uses a rubric, right, where we can see like how did DESE make these determinations, and really thinking about, like I just mentioned, the data that about outcomes for students with disabilities being the driver for how these determinations are developed. And the data elements, including both compliance and performance. And I think the other really important thing to say about the data is that these are data elements that we already collect and that we already report on, particularly using the indicator data through the SPP APR, and the cohorts that you're in and the data that you submit to us is really the basis for a lot of this. Not all of it, but a lot of the data elements do come from information that we already collect and that we already report on. So we're not looking for kind of surprises here, like, well, where did that come from? You already know this because you've reported it to us or we've reported it publicly. It's more in terms of how we've organized it to make these determinations. And then we feel really strongly about just making sure that we're also connecting the determinations to support. And so thinking about the way in which we can provide you with both data and with some of our existing liaisons from the charter school office, from our assistance teams, statewide systems of support, the Office of Strategic Transformation, so that it's not like a ricochet where you're like kind of going from one support team to another. Our special ed team is working through a lot of other teams to make sure that we are connected and cohesive in our follow-up and support to you. And we know that some of the feedback that we've gotten is, Russell, it's a really busy year, and we know that, we recognize that. We are required to produce these annually, and so we wanted to just make sure that you're getting this information. Hopefully, you can put it to good use. February, thinking about how it works into further budget planning for next year, further programmatic planning for next year. We know that improvement takes time, and we want to work with you on that. And we also just acknowledge that there would be no great time this year for these letters to come out, and so we hope that you'll just take a deep breath with us and work with us on following up on any of these next steps. So I already mentioned that we're using a rubric this year, and we did last year too. So this isn't brand new whatsoever. But as you can see, these categories for the determinations are really aligned to both compliance and outcomes associated with special education. So the dropout rate, the 5-year graduation rate, findings from public school monitoring, findings from our PRS system, and then our indicators, like I mentioned before, and significant disproportionality data all factored into each determination that we just released this week. We did prioritize 2 categories. First, the 5-year graduation rate, and then LRE as being 2 that we particularly gave more weight to. So they were weighted at kind of 2 times the rate as others. And it's important because we wanted to make sure that we kind of highlighted that graduation is the kind of the ultimate sign of success for the vast majority of our students, and the ultimate sign of achievement. And so we wanted to make sure that we really gave that considerable weight from within the system. And with regards to LRE, we want to make sure that we're providing that continuum of services. And so we're looking for kind of giving weight to where students are able to access, particularly inclusion and partial inclusion, and not sort of only or mainly or disproportionately having access to more substantially separate settings. And so feeling like those are such key ingredients in the success of our children, is having that access to a full continuum, and particularly to partial and full inclusion, as well as graduating, were things that we wanted to make sure that we really highlighted. And there are some additional topics down here that could be worth going back over, and perhaps in the Q&A section that we'll pause on here in just a minute and see what your questions are. But like I mentioned, these are the categories, and then certain once we did the scoring, depending on where each district scored, they fell into one of the categories. And so I hope that just sort of brings, again, some transparency to the process about how we determine where each district was determined to be. And then really following up from there on support and thinking about the support that you'll receive, particularly if you are identified for needs assistance. So this is really for those districts that were identified as needs assistance. Just know that there'll be follow-up from a member of our special education team. And we intend to dive in deeper with you in a webinar devoted solely to this topic. And particularly, we know there are a lot of questions about the data elements that went into this, because by understanding the data, right, we can help to maybe change trajectories further in the future. And so we'll be going over that further in a webinar to talk about both some of the information as well as the support and resources that we can provide to you. And then finally, just that reminder about how being identified for needs assistance affects maintenance of effort. This has always been the case. This is not new. We just really want to bring it to the forefront, though, that MOE has to, we have to maintain, there's less flexibility. There's not the flexibility for maintenance of effort if you are identified as needs assistance. And I remember my business manager talking to me about that years and years ago when we were identified in my district for needs assistance. For needs intervention, again, we're going to follow up to think about how we connect with, like I was mentioning before, the whatever we have as assistance liaisons for you from the department. If you're a charter school, the charter school office, our statewide systems of support team, as examples, there are others, and figuring out how we integrate with whatever other assistance you might be receiving, or figuring out how to create that in some instances as well. And then we're going to look more deeply into your information by having a meeting to look at the data with you, as well as to think about that plan for providing assistance. And again, just that reminder about MOE also applies to the districts identified for needs intervention. So Jamie, you can tell my throat's getting really dry, Nina. And so let's see what questions there are about the determinations. Actually, I'll just show real quick. We know that our next meeting is coming up on March 11th, but I'll move now to the Q&A. And so Jamie, Bonnie, Nina, glad to see what the questions are.
Great, thanks, Russell. So we do have a number